Chefeteers, I'm Chef Nakia and I want you to be more confident in the kitchen. And I am pretty embarrassed about this, but I have to admit, I lied to all of you. Back in, shoot, when was this? August or September, I made a video talking about how I was preparing to make the cocktail hour food and desserts for my upcoming wedding. And I said that I would post one more video before the wedding talking through more of the preparation, a little bit of the execution, and I would post that in September. And I didn't. So that was the lie, is I totally got overwhelmed with stuff and I never got around to editing that video. And yes, here we are in November and I'm finally getting back around to editing some of this old footage that I have. So I suppose I need to start with an apology. Just in case anybody out there was like on the edge of their seat waiting for the second video, so sorry to have delayed it for so long. And because I already filmed it, I feel like even though it's pretty late, I can still share it with you all. But my wedding has come and gone and it was lovely, and I know more now than I did whenever I first filmed this video. So what I'm going to do, instead of just showing you what I already had as is I'm going to show you some clips and then I will react to how well I did what I said I was going to do. So, you know, there's a saying of like, do as I say, not as I do. Yeah, I'll give myself a grade as far as how well did I do as I say. Said, whatever. And then I will still make a third video that is going to be very much a reaction to the wedding and to how preparing desserts and cocktail hour food for my own wedding went. What do I regret doing, or what am I super happy with doing? And if I did it again, what might I do differently? There's the food part of planning, and then there's like the equipment and other part of planning, and then there's the people support part of planning. So in this video, we'll go through getting the materials and things ready to be able to either prepare and or execute on the communicating well to people, gathering the equipment, and the food part. I'm gonna start with the gathering of the equipment. So start gathering those, platters and serving equipment like spoons or tongs or whatever early on, and organize them into bins that make sense, label them clearly, and I always like to have a master list of these items that I'm going to need also, that way I can double check that I have everything. If your storage bin thing has a lid, you can wash everything, put it in there and seal that lid up. If it does not yet, then plan to pull that out a couple days before your event and wash everything, because it may get dusty depending on where you're storing it. And you want to make sure everything's nice and clean before you start working on like the food that you're going to put in there. If you have to pause and like wipe everything down and then put the food in, it just adds an extra layer that you don't want to have to deal with at the time. So organize those platters, get them clean in a timely manner. And if you're like me and you're doing some cocktail hour food and some desserts, I'd recommend keeping the dessert platters together and the cocktail hour food platters and serving dishes and things together. That way it's more organized whenever you go to start plating up your stuff. I'm gonna give myself an A on that. I did maybe wait a little bit closer to the wedding to get all of these lists and everything created, but thinking through like what is the food going to be displayed on, how will people get the food off of the displayed platter, and what kind of extra napkins, plates, silverware, whatever might they need, guests need to eat the food, and what like food storage containers might the food need to live in before it gets on the platter, and what coolers do we need, all of that stuff. Definitely thought through well, had it prepared, organized, labeled pretty well. I think I did really, really well on that. And I don't think it made it in that clip, but if you are in this process and you are looking to gather up your serving utensils, serving platters, what have you, you can first have a Smoky Kitty maybe help you with that. Very great on the passion part, not so good on the actually executing part, but we love her anyway. But if you're looking for these platters, once you have created a list of what all you will need, and then you look at what you have and you find what the gap is, if you are looking to fill in that gap with other serving platters, instead of buying new, you could consider going to like thrift store type places, or if you are part of a church, they may have serving utensils and things that they would allow you to borrow. And you can also look on like Facebook, there's wedding groups or just other like trade or, you know, buy for relatively cheap recycled weddings type groups. You may be able to find these things in a much less expensive way. You could also reach out to friends, family members, and ask if you can borrow any of their stuff. If you do that, I recommend label the bottom with some tape and the name of who brought it, because it can get hectic and you don't want to forget who gave you what. Another potential concern with doing all of this yourself, which is the storage space. So if you are in a one-bedroom apartment and you barely have room for anything, you might not have enough room to like be storing these platters and, you know, keeping them all organized. Before you commit to this, really think about realistically how much space you have to be storing all of these different items that you will be collecting in preparation for this. Yes, that goes for equipment and it goes for food. And if you want to freeze things, make sure you have enough freezer space. And if you don't, do you have a family member who will let you store stuff in their freezer? And if not, you might have to do a lot more right before the wedding instead of being able to freeze stuff and access it later. So be realistic of your food storage space and your equipment storage space. Okay, I would like a B minus maybe on this one for us. So I did know that having enough freezer space for our pre-made desserts was going to be a challenge. And I thought that we had a freezer secured, and then I found out, oh, some things changed and they need that freezer space, so we can't use it anymore. And so we found a solution, but what that ended up resulting in is I had about 4 days to make all of the cake jars. And I'm gonna show you here like a time lapse, super quick time lapse of what assembling these cake jars looked like. Yes, in hindsight, it would have been nice to have planned that a little bit better. So I could have maybe spent 2 weeks working on these desserts instead of 4 days. But it's okay, it all worked out. And then another note about space and why I would give us a B minus is transporting all of our stuff, food, decor, platters, like clothes, just like the normal things you need when you go on a trip. I totally underestimated how much space we were gonna need altogether. So the day before we left for our wedding, we actually had to go last minute rent a U-Haul trailer in order to fit everything in. So again, that's why I'm leaning towards a B minus on this like storage space. So absolutely this, as you are compiling these things, getting them organized and or making your food, you want to make sure that you are storing them in a food safe way or just in like a smart way for your non-edible items. And also really think through the transportation. How many like huge bins of things you may have, and just the reality of whose car is that going to fit in. Now moving on to like the people support. First of all, you want to list out the specific people who you need to enlist for help and have a conversation with each of them way ahead of time. Like I'm talking like a month or longer ahead of time. If they are willing and able to do what you hope that they will do to help you with getting this food either ready or displayed. Be very clear about your expectations, and even if you have a conversation and they agree to it and you tell them the details, be sure to write those down somewhere else and share them with that person so that they can reference them at any point, because they're probably not going to remember everything that you said. So make sure that there is a reference for them. I would recommend sharing this digitally and having a hard copy on the day. So you can use pictures to explain it, or you could label the platter with, you know, a specific number or something like that. And so like on the bottom of the platter, you can number each of them. Just be clear when you're communicating. That way, as people are helping you, they can be super confident that they're doing it the right way, and you don't have to, you know, field a bunch of questions about like, what are we doing here? Or what is this? Or is this the right one? Now, whenever we're thinking about like transportation and transporting that food to the venue to then display, this is a great time to be able to print and tape on the cooler, let's say exactly what food is in there. If it needs to be transported to a platter, write that down. And then if you have a picture of how you want the table to look, you can put that there too. Now, if you have somebody like a wedding coordinator who's willing to help with this too, you might even want to have a section in like a binder that you give them for the whole day on a specific section for the food. And if you do this, I still wouldn't skip like taping the instructions on the cooler itself. I think just a solid C. I'm just gonna go with a solid C for how well I did on this. The biggest problem actually is that I did not think that I needed as many people involved as, looking back, what I really needed. So I did have a few people in mind to help, and I was very clear with those instructions. However, within that plan, I did have a lot of things that I wanted to still do. And so looking back, I would have probably entrusted 2 more people ahead of time and divvied up some of my tasks to those people. And maybe it's really hard to go back in time and think about what I would be willing to like give up. But I think even if I still planned to maybe do those things myself, but just have another person as a backup to, number one, like, hey, will you please ask me if I have done this or not, to make sure I stay on time and I have everything done ahead of time. And then when I say, oh no, time is flying and it's really weird how close you get to the wedding, how many things there are to do, and how unrealistic time feels, then I could have said, no, I don't have time to do that, will you please help me? And then they would have already known what needed to be done. What I shared about having a good plan and then having a digital copy and a printed copy, absolutely, I totally stand behind. We did a good job of doing this with all of our decor setup. And once it got to the food, what I realized was, so like a couple weeks before the wedding, I realized I don't really know exactly what is going to be prepped at exactly what time. Like I found that it was hard for me to really picture exactly what was going to happen with the food. So it was a little bit more difficult to write out that plan. There were some things that did need to be figured out like way closer. However, I still could have done a better job at getting a framework of a plan and then plugging in those details about like which freezer is it in, like they're the day before the wedding. And I have not used these. However, I believe that there are services available where you can automate texts throughout your wedding day. So if you have a timeline, actually I think it's called Perfect Wedding Timeline by Jamie Wolfer. Anyway, it will automatically send texts to important people about important events that are coming up. You could add a section into it that is what needs to be happening with your food, and then you could have it text the person a reminder that their job is about to come up. Again, please have a conversation with that person ahead of time so they're not just randomly getting a text and like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And then I also reference this Perfect Wedding Timeline by Jamie Wolfer, and I never personally did use it. However, looking back, I totally see how it could have been super duper helpful. We just made the timeline ourselves, shared it with our wedding party family, friends, our vendors. Of course, our vendors needed that information, and it seemed to all work out really well. This Perfect Wedding Timeline from Jamie, which I'll find a link for either that or her YouTube channel or something, so that if you don't know who she is and you want wedding planning help, like she's really the best person to go to for wedding planning help. Anyway, I'll look in the description box for that. But the idea of the text reminders and things like that, looking back, I would have even set those up for myself for the days surrounding the wedding too. So I think that there's a huge amount of utility in a service like that, and like the automated reminders that you can set. And looking back, I really wish that we had done that. Even if we already had our timeline set and solid, to be able to put it into a software like that and then it automatically set up these reminders, that would have been super duper nice. Okay, so as we planned, we chose the foods that we felt would be simple and easy to execute with the conditions that we have going on. Now I need to actually schedule in, okay, when am I gonna bake the cake? When am I going to build the cake and the mousse into jars and freeze those? When am I going to bake the pie? When am I going to mix the cookie dough? And I could freeze it as dough and bake it later, or I could bake it right away. When am I going to go grocery shopping for the ingredients for the baking items? And then it'll be a separate grocery shopping trip for the ingredients for the cocktail hour food. And then I need to create a schedule for, okay, when am I going to create the cocktail hour food within that time that we're there? Okay, now I touched on this briefly, though it was a little bit out of order, but leading up to the wedding, I did create a schedule, and this is like a schedule as far as like days over a couple months of getting my recipes prepared for the dishes that I was going to make, and then creating a grocery shopping list and going grocery shopping, and then planning out when I am going to make certain like components of the desserts and assemble them and all of these things. And like I said before, there was that little panic moment of, oh my gosh, what freezer are we going to use? Oh, we're going to use that freezer. I need to get everything ready really fast. But I had the schedule, so I knew where to like plug that in at least, or move it up. And you know, cutting and packing desserts, and then a grocery shopping list for cocktail hour food and how that was going to be prepared. So having like a master schedule like that was very important to keep me on track, and whenever these other timely, unplanned events happened, I was able to pretty easily look at the schedule and adjust things around to make it still fit and work with relatively little stress. So that is your behind the scenes look at how I am preparing the cocktail hour food and desserts. for my upcoming wedding. And especially if you are considering, do I want to do this for myself or not? Hopefully seeing the steps I'm taking can help you really decide if this works well for your schedule and your skills and just your desire. Like, is this really what you want to do? Or are you just trying to do everything you can for the budget? Because I totally get it. I'm with you. Weddings are expensive. This is one potential way to save money, but this might not speak to you, and this might feel like just too much, and that's totally fine. So once we are working with the perishable, I think really distinguishing between what can be done way ahead of time and what must be done more last minute, it is important. That way you can get as much of that pre-work done as early as possible so that you are not exhausted on your wedding day. And we'll see how exhausted I am or not. Join me for the third video in a couple months and we'll see. All right, so there you have it. This is the very much delayed video of the last half of planning, first part of executing for making my own desserts and cocktail hour food for my wedding. And one thing that I will note now that I believe when I filmed this I didn't know yet is our caterer who was doing our main meal. We had a conversation and he actually said that for them it would be a better use of time and labor and everything if they were able to do a couple of their side dishes as appetizers during cocktail hour. So the reality of our wedding is that I did half of the cocktail hour food. Caterer did half of the cocktail hour food. Caterer did the whole main meal. And then we actually got some bread from one of my husband's coworkers. So we brought the fresh bread for the table, super awesome. And then I did all of the desserts for our wedding. So that probably at the time that I filmed this, I did think that I was going to be doing all of the cocktail hour food, and the fact that our caterer said, hey, it actually works better for us to have some of these plates go out earlier, did mean that I was able to scale back a little bit on the cocktail hour food, and it worked out really, really well. But that is all for this video. The next video that I will share with you will be my reaction to having done all of the cocktail hour food, well, sorry, half of the cocktail hour food and all of the desserts for my wedding. Would I do it again or not? If I could go back in time, what would I do differently? I shared a little bit about that already with you all today, but there is one huge thing that I overlooked. I just really had no idea the importance and the implications that this was going to make, and I'll let you know how it would have changed my decision and some of the things that I did in the next video. So yeah, I won't even tell you yet if I regret it or not. You can probably tell from my face maybe where I'm leaning, but yes, tune in. And this one I will not make you wait 2 months for it. It'll come out in 2 weeks, don't you worry. Thank you so much, Chefeteers. And if you like hearing about DIY wedding food, subscribe. And if you don't really like hearing about DIY wedding food, but you do love learning about how to become more confident in the kitchen, like cooking and meal planning tips, then also subscribe, because that is the bulk of what I talk about on this channel. So we will chat again soon.